Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this week's Tufts Capstone check-in. I only put one thing on the agenda, which is just like this is your last week before spring break. Want to check in about that, how you're feeling about that, what you need to get wrapped up, how we can support you with that. Um, and then Gina's also got a bit on recruiting. But let's start at the top. How you feeling about this week, about your progress in the project, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think over the past week we got a lot done. We wrapped up our research and we've started some ideation. For this week's meeting, we also plan to kind of give you guys like a quick update about what we've done, what we have on our Figma board, and then also we scoped down our project and we have like maybe like two or three ideas that we're planning to follow through with. So we would like some feedback on that from you guys as well today.
Cool. Great. Yeah, you can go ahead and dive into that if you'd like.
Yeah, I can share my screen.
Mhm.
Can you guys see my Figma?
Yes.
Okay. So first we did like a interview recap for each person that we interviewed, with like kind of like their issues, the steps they take to onboard, the major pain points and like their quotes. And then we kind of did like an affinity mapping where we put it in like four categories, navigation, lack of context, labels, and like having too much information. Um, we also did how might we's. We all came up with a couple and we voted on like the top how might we's. And the one we found really interesting was like how um do we differentiate like past irrelevant conversation to current conversation? And that's like something that came up in their interview that like kind of after reading the description and like following through with it, they found that it wasn't aligned with like the last like solution that was written in the discussion where they didn't like kind of read through. So um we also did translating our findings into insights. I think Sunjung mentioned in the Slack that like or chat that like a lot were kind of just like factual but not like translated into like actionable items. So we put like our findings, how that translates into insights and like the potential solutions that we thought could come out of our findings. Um, we also created a two personas. One is a product designer and one of a is a product developer. And then the s- engineer is like new to the company, whilst like the product designer has been at the company for a while. And we chose to stick with the engineer because we think that um kind of like onboarding as like someone new to the company would be kind of difficult for them, and also like developers kind of navigate the issue board a little bit differently. If anyone else wants to add, feel free. Um, and then we did an empathy map for the full stack engineer about what they think, say, do, and feel. We also created like a customer journey map where kind of like the phase would be like getting pinged to understanding the concepts, reading the information, and then like kind of setting up like a synchronous meeting with their PM to kind of like have the overall idea. And we think that like most of the time they require kind of like having a synchronous meeting, and like the issue board is not like sufficient enough for them to kind of get to like on board. So we think that that is like a major kind of like pain point we want to tackle, that like how can we give them all of the information they need without having to set up a meeting or like um going back and forth between like working and still onboarding. And in the past week, we also created like crazy eights, which is kind of like um start like quickly drawing like eight frames about what we thought could be the potential solution. And we also did like a more detailed frames for each person about like what we thought. And we had like three key ideas to focus on. First is like navigation. So there's a lot of epics, ancestor links, and kind of like child items that relate to each other or like are dependent on each other. And we wanted a way to kind of like visualize or help like developers see how they relate to each other, how they can navigate between them, and like better understand their own issue related to other issues. So that's our first one. The second one was like the disconnect between the discussion and kind of the um, description. So kind of it's not being like regularly updated, and the description doesn't align with like the discussions from their PMs or like previous like developers who kind of set a solution that's not on the description. And then the third one, um, what was it?
Which one's the third one you're looking at? Is it the left on the bottom?
Mm,
I remember, I think, is that Anne's, the filters one?
Oh, yeah. Um, so it's just a way to like differentiate. Um, so we're still thinking like which filters to use, but it's actually essentially like a way to differentiate like which issues were pinned and versus like which comments are we are like that are not really di directly related to the user. But yeah, so we're thinking like different filters, or there may be other filters that may be in use. It's just a way to like easily skim through the different like discussion comments.
mhm. So for like the navigation, we thought of like kind of having like a float like flow chart or like a diagram or like a diagram like down on the bottom right where it kind of like links and shows like which one's dependent on each other, which one's like the main epic, and kind of like giving a rough idea about kind of what the whole like background context displays. And then for like onset there's filtering, and then for the misalignment we were thinking about like um having like pinning comments or like adding comments to kind of the own description to kind of regularly update without having to like manually update by themselves or something like that. But kind of we're in like the ideation phase, and we're thinking about like which direction to like dive deep into and like start wireframing by the end of this week.
Wow, okay, you have done a lot. I've got a question on your personas.
Yeah.
How do they, or do they at all, relate to our internal personas? Like, are they based off of them? Are they just completely separate? I'm interested in the what and why on them.
Yeah, so for the personas, I think in terms of like how much are they based on the internal, I think a lot just because a lot of the insights that we had were from the internal. I think at that point we only have one external person that we had interviewed, and so I
Oh,
think
sorry.
some of
What I mean is
the
we have user personas in GitLab,
Mhm.
and there is one that's a designer, there is one that's a developer. And I was wondering if you base the personas you have on those ones that we have defined, or if you made
Mm,
your own from scratch, or if you compared them and whatever. Like, I'm just interested in that part.
yeah, and then I think it's like more from scratch, just based on the information that we had.
Okay. And that's not a, to be clear, that's not a bad thing. I was just wondering what you had. Have you looked at our internal personas? They may be helpful, they may not be helpful. I think that, the scope and nature of your project is such that you can totally make your own. You don't have to use ours.
No, for sure. I actually didn't take a look at them. I think it must have been like one of the links that I just like had or like went past me. So yeah, I didn't take a look.
Lot of links. A lot of links to
Yeah.
navigate. Lot to onboard to.
No, yeah, but I'll for sure take a look. I think that's I didn't realize those were available, but I'll take a look.
And then another question that I had was for the filtering. What are the kinds of things you were thinking about doing filtering on?
Um, s- so that was just an idea that I came up with like during the Crazy Eight activity. So one idea that I talk about is filtering for the comments are directly related to the users because like from the interviews, some of them said that they will only look for comments where they are mentioned by others or comments by PMs and those kind of stuff. So that's just one idea. The other idea I'm thinking is filtering by like the priority of the um like the discussions like being mentioned. But that is something to be discussed further.
Hmm, I see. What, how would you, so I
Yeah. So I guess
understand.
yeah. Oh sorry. I guess like they just like a way to make the like information hierarchy of the issue like being mentioned like more like clearer. Because I think one thing that we want to focus on is also like the hierarchy of the information in the issue.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah, the way that you would put together the functionality for like filtering on like comments that, you know, are by this person or comments that mention that person, that makes sense to me. How would you calculate what priority means?
Yeah. So from the interviews, they are different. So like each person have like different priorities when it comes to their own issue. And um yeah, that is something that I haven't really thought about because like um as I have mentioned, like there are different mentions of the types of priorities that people really look for when they look at an issue. So yeah, that is something that I will consider
Mm.
now.
I would say off the top of my head, I know like a lot of the people that we talk to, since like every team is different and they have like their own kind of like orders of doing things. And a lot of them, I think, had already like would set the priorities in terms of like low versus high. So I kind of assumed too, like for the ones that were labeled as like low versus high, we would go according to those. But also like right now, I'm like, I don't know how flawed that is in terms of relying on everybody's relying on people to label their issues accordingly.
Mm.
Is there a part where you'd like us to like talk more in detail about whether it's like any of the designs or insights?
Um, I'm interested in kind of the so excuse me, sorry. Uh Moya, you said that one of the how might we's that you found really interesting was how can we differentiate past irrelevant conversations from current conversations? And how does that relate to kind of the key ideas in your wireframes? I think that kind of the disconnect between the discussion and the description of the issue, kind of like trying to bring the comment content somehow into that description body. I can see how those are related. But yeah, what I guess what were your other how might we's like? Are they also compelling? Like you mentioned that you trying to scope down the projects. You have 2 or 3 ideas you want to follow through with. Like, so it seems like you're kind of at like a decision point where you want to kind of like pick. Do you want to pick one of these? Do you want to find how these work together and kind of work on them together, or where do you want to go next with this? Because you've
Mhm.
done a lot of work. You've produced a lot of ideas for yourself. You've got a lot of stuff that you can like work with now. So yeah, what do you want to like? What do you want to be doing? Not next week, but after spring break. You know.
Yeah. So, the how might we kind of came before all like the research synthesis. So we kind of picked like the conversation first. But kind of after doing the research, we did like kind of like the affinity mapping where we did like different like parts of the onboarding pain points. So I think that the one we want to focus most is kind of navigation and incorporating like past conversations and like description updates as well. So I think you like for the wireframes, most of our ideas were based on navigation with like some parts of um discussion. So for example, I think this is mine, but um we have like kind of like a map where it links to like another issue, like related issue, and then that kind of notifies that like, oh, this issue is dependent. And then in like the description, you can kind of see like a pinged or like a pinned comment that like this relates to like another issue or like this is dependent on another issue so that like those comments are like further up for the developer to see or something like that. So, we're kind of trying to incorporate both, like making the description aligned and also kind of like improving like the navigation for developers. Um, I think that's what we're like discussing to like within our team too about like which one we should focus more on or like if the scope is like too like narrow or like too broad. Um, yeah.
Something like for a little more context, something that came up in the interviews is like when they're looking through the discussion thread, one of the developers says one of the first things he looks for is like other linked issues. And he also mentioned how there's like currently a section for like child items or like linked items,
Mhm.
and that's kind of hard to visualize to see like how does this current issue relate to other like epics and other past issues. So the idea is to have some sort of a diagram that like tree diagram that visualizes that. So you have like a bigger picture understanding of how all the issues relate to each other and like what problem you're solving.
I was just gonna say we do have this thing, which it sounds like you already know. I added a screenshot of those widgets that we have that just so you can see what they look like in an issue of linked items, child items. And then also if there's merge requests that relate to that issue, there's a list of those, but just something to keep in mind because those things exist and then trying to figure out how to add your design in into the existing issue rather than making something brand new that doesn't like really connect with that. I feel like that's going to be a challenge. It always is a challenge for design.
Yeah. We were like kind of thinking about like using that box as well. Um, as Delia mentioned, like that like the list was like really like hard to follow and um yeah, we think we could do a lot with that.
Nice, yeah.
So yeah, in terms of part that we want you to like talk in more detail about to us, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes you didn't, do either you have any? Like anything you want them to dig more into from what Moya gave us an overview of?
Digging into, I don't think that there was anything specific that came up on my end. I think, like I had said before, more of figuring out how your solution is going to fit into the existing product. I think that's what I would push you to try to do rather than creating something new. Not like you can't create it something like an enhanced experience. I mean, like rather than creating like a new page. Hopefully that came out correctly.
It sounds like you all would like some advice on narrowing. And I think that I am going to turn that back around on you and ask you a question and say, well, like which, what do you think is a more severe pain point to solve? What do you think is a more effective solution? And why? Do you have any reasoning behind that? I think that's what you should follow. Those are kind of like, I think the rubric or the kind of the heuristics you should apply to this as you're kind of looking at these and trying to narrow down is like what's going to make it the most better for a user. What improves the experience the most, what makes it clearer, easier, faster to use in the most cases, if you want to narrow down to only one of these. Now I do think that it is also possible, it's a larger scope, but it is also possible to think about a couple of these at once. I don't think you necessarily have to say like we're only going to work on like network visualization for interconnectedness of issues versus we're going to look at trying to figure out how we can get like currently relevant conversation threads more prominent versus ones that are already resolved or something like that. Like I think that there's kind of a combination of those that could make sense if you want to, that's around like adding context and whatever to issues or work items. I don't think you have to just pick like one of these and go with it, but it obviously gets more complicated the more of these you consider. So, thinking about kind of like the writing a lab report aspect of it, you could also kind of try to run with both of them a little bit when it's cheap and easy, when it's just wireframes. Like develop kind of maybe your top two out of these three a little bit more, and then compare them and try to pick one and go with it. It's kind of up to you what way you want to go, but I would say like try to keep your North Star being like what's going to be the most useful and usable.
Also, for the phase where you talk to users after you come up with your wireframes, first of all, we'll start recruiting earlier so that you are able to talk to external users, but you could show them, if you were to develop two, like Chad was saying, you could show both of them and see whether you do a usability test with each and then compare the results after that, or just get general feedback on both concepts. You could rely on your users to tell you which ones are better, rather than if you don't feel confident in narrowing down to one as a group.
Yeah, and that is also possibly even something that you could do as an unmoderated user testing as well. You would maybe want to make something that looks closer to a real UI than a wireframe sketch maybe for that, or you would just need to rely on like writing some really clear description of like what the intent is kind of thing to get people to compare. But you might be able to like not have to actually schedule your own time for that and like get people to asynchronously give you that input if you wanted to do that. But basically, I think there's a natural point in this kind of project where you start getting anxious about, okay, I need to pick something and go with it. you don't have to like pick one thing right now and throw the rest of it away. You could like develop them a little bit further if you think there's kind of something to them, and then kind of compare them when they're like a little bit meatier, when it's a little bit clearer kind of what the trade-offs of them are or what value they add. But you know, as you make the decisions, try to just bear in mind that like whatever's gonna be the most useful relative to like the data you've collected should be the direction you go. You know, try to follow the data on it.
Like, do do the students have an access to the existing research project? They maybe finding connecting dots like with this new research and then the previous research may be helpful at this point.
Um, so they can, the legal stuff is set up such that they can. Unfortunately, Danica is on PTO this week.
Oh yeah.
The user researcher for Plan. So I think that it's possible that we could ask her next week when she's back in the office to say like, hey, these are like some things that students are thinking about. Do you have any research that touches on these? Like, can you usually give me a bunch of links, and then maybe we will have a bunch of links that we could share with you when you're back after spring break. That's like relevant kind of extant data results or research results about those concepts. Um, but yeah, I don't know. She's on vacation right now.
Yeah. I think that's one way that I could think of.
Mhm.
And have you all considered like so I think this is like a lot of work, so like I just wanted to say it's a great work. But of course I could also understand a little bit of it's just nervous at this point, like you know, and I could totally feel you. But it's okay. Like as Gina also mentioned, like you can also pick two and then just asking users more feedback, like which is more impactful. So at this point, like having more data would be a good win. So that was the reason why I was asking the previous question. And I'd like to also ask you, like, you also did the competitor research at the previous steps. So maybe you could have more chance like learning from competitors. Like probably some of their features are having these ideas and just by looking into those competitors and then just trying those flow by yourselves maybe give you some more confidence to choose which ideas to go.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So between now and the end of the week, I'm assuming that spring break starts next week. So you're like still doing stuff through the end of this week, but I don't know. I might be wrong about that. But from now until spring break starts anyway, what are the things you want to like make sure you've kind of like stowed away? And are there any ways that we can help support you with that?
For from now until the end of the week, we plan to have like a rough wireframe of like our ideas. So more definitely more defined than what we have right now, and like probably specific to like two of like maybe the things we're interested in. And then the other thing is we're gonna have like a usability like testing plan. So kind of like how we plan to navigate from now until user testing, how we plan to recruit or maybe like the different ways, because I think we have to do like 2 rounds of user testing. So we'll have like a rough plan for both of them.
Cool.
For that recruiting, just so that we can get that ball rolling earlier, so that you're definitely able to meet with more external participants. It's okay if the answer is that you don't know yet. Do you think that the screener will be similar to the users that you wanted to talk to the first round?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Well, is it? Because it sounds like you've got two personas that you want to focus on. So you might, I don't think that the screener you did the first time narrowed down to just that. You know, like for your second round, do you want to talk to product managers, for example?
Mm.
Maybe focused on like the engineer persona more, because I know we were interested in like how issues are linked together, which seems more relevant to engineers.
Yeah, and I think that given our user base, by narrowing down to engineer, I don't think you're like making it hard for yourself to find people.
Agreed. Yeah. So maybe just so that we can get the recruiting started early, if you could come up with a screener this week, or, well, yeah, I would say this week. That would be great, even if it's just rough like questions of what you're looking for, and then we can help define it from there.
Yeah, this sounds good.
Okay.
And it's probably just a slightly tweaked version of the screener that you used last time. So it's not like a starting from scratch kind of thing. Because now it's really just like you have more focus than you did last time. So
Another thing we were talking about is when we're doing testing, like how should we compare like the user experience now to our like change design? Like how would we collect some metrics for that when we're doing testing?
I'm really glad that you are thinking about the metrics. B, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. At this stage, it may be difficult only because, like, you know, even if you're going to put together some kind of more matured wireframes for your ideas, they're still only wireframes. I do definitely think that trying to do kind of an A/B comparison of the same task in the actual version we have on production today and in like your final wireframe will be a really interesting set of data to collect. Like, you know, are people like better able to, you know, accomplish this task, or like how does it take like a, you know, statistically significantly shorter amount of time for them to do it or whatever. Um, I would say if you want to try to get the current experience as part of it in this stage, you would maybe want to make some wireframes that are at the same level of maturity as your wireframes of our current experience and put them in the mix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to like do the same way as just chat mentioned. Like that's also normally how I compare the performance of the new design. And yeah, it's just an additional work, but you can just make a similar level of fidelity of the current proposal. So current your proposal and then the current design. And if you want to explore some tools, I think like this kind of test works well. If you're thinking about unmoderated tests, you can also do it fairly quickly using Maze. And you can create the clickable prototype tests and then also add some of your task there. I find it was very quick and easy for me, but the tool is totally up to you. Just it was popping up in my mind. So
Maze, like MAZE.
yeah.
It does kind of make you think of your participants as like lab rats, maybe, the name of that product, but yeah, the same thing with user testing as well. I don't know if Linda ever was able to get user testing accounts set up for you. But user testing can do the same kind of thing. I think the only thing that's difficult about that one is like, well, I guess they kind of work the same actually, but user testing, I found that sometimes if users have low tech empathy, it can be hard for them to figure out how to get it to like record their screen and stuff. But I think that's kind of going to happen with any of these. But you're probably not going to run into that with engineers. So
One other note with if you do want to compare current experience, you don't have to feel like you need to recreate every single thing in Figma. You can just take screenshots way faster.
yeah, you usually take a screenshot and draw some boxes over the screenshot.
Yeah.
Like, there you go.
Yeah, trust me, it's not worth getting into the whole making every single thing clickable and yeah, it's just faster with screenshots.
So like kind of thinking about our first usability testing, like would it be valuable to have like two of our like wireframes of like what we're different types of designs we're thinking about, and then one of the current, and then kind of comparing the three?
Yeah, and just bear in mind as you're putting together your plan for how this experience goes for the participant, that like if you want them to interact with 3 different wireframes, you got to be really focused on the kinds of questions you want to ask them, so that A, it doesn't take them like an hour to do, and B, so that they like don't forget in between or something. Like make sure that you have kind of like small enough bites for them to take where they can actually kind of hold the 2 different ideas in their mind at the same time, because you're thinking about this a lot. They're thinking about it not at all.
Right.
Also, feel free to have one of us pilot, or anyone else at GitLab pilot the test before you officially want to send it out. Could be a good way to vet out if the questions are, if we understand the questions and if the prototype works as expected. Or one of your other classmates from your class could be a good persona as well.
It's also likely that the internal initial round participants who you spoke with here would be willing to click through that for you as well.
Is do you guys have like do you guys write plans for usability testing? Is there like an example one we can see?
Yes. I have generally done, I don't know if this is the way you're supposed to do it at GitLab, but I've generally done this in an issue. And I just make like basically a numbered list, and then I'll make a Google Doc, because the Google Doc can turn into a template to use for taking notes. I don't know if that's what Gene and Sundong have done.
Basically, yeah. I don't think
The
it,
same.
yeah. I think it's sometimes easier to collaborate in a Google Doc if you're working with the team. But we can send you an example.
So Gina, you also had a note in here on recruiting for the current round.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, there were no other bites on that other wave that Kate sent out. So I just wanted to check if there was 2, you met with one external user. Did the second one end up booking?
Yeah, we were talking to them today.
Okay. So I'm gonna try my best this time to start this like really early. I'll open the issue today to see if we can start getting more rounds of recruitment, and I'll work with Kate on that so that this next round you'll be able to talk to a lot more external users.
Sounds good. Thank you.
This is a bit of housekeeping on our end, but I almost wonder if in future years we should just like have a generic screener that we like start trying to recruit initial participants for, with kind of like no knowledge of what the students will do like at the beginning of January, basically, so we can like have a stable appeal to be like, here you go.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Something we should just start a discussion with Kate and see what she thinks too, because even for past years, she's helped us recruit. So she'd probably have a good idea or feedback on what we could do.
So you've got a lot of work to do. I don't, we could cut it here and you can go have a bit of your time back. Is there anything else you want to check in about while we're all here, or mostly here?
I actually have a quick question.
Mhm.
So maybe just like from like what you guys have seen, but do you know how like external users normally like format their issues? Because we had our first external interview like last week, and it was like so hard for us to visualize like what they have on their screen without them sharing their screen because they weren't like able to. So like we don't know if like kind of what we have is applicable to external users as much as like internal users that we've seen like the templates and like kind of how they have it laid out. Maybe from your experiences, like do you have any like ideas about how they're typically like written? Like is it similar or I don't know.
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, I think that the only part that's going to vary is the markdown parts and like whether or not they use certain features. So like the description block, uh that's just up to you as the person who writes the issue. But like the child items thing is always going to be there. You might not use it. The linked items thing is always going to be there. You might not use it. The branches or MRs thing is actually only going to be there if you've got an associated branch or MR, but it depends on if you use it or not. And same thing with comments. Comments, the content of the comment is like whatever, who knows what someone's going to put in there. But like if they add comments, the shape of the comment will always look the same. So like at a high level, structurally, it's going to be the same. In terms of what they're putting into their description, yeah, that is totally individual and org dependent. They may have a really strict template they want to use with certain sections and whatever. They may just kind of loosey goosey. It may vary from project to project within that org. There's not a good way to know. I do know that the plan team, I think, have collected some anonymous data about like the average length of descriptions before in order to test out some ideas about things they were doing with the formatting of like a work item description and whether or not it should be truncated sometimes and all that kind of thing. I don't know if they have access to internal research about like, whatever, like screenshots of actual issues or something that like users have shared with them and said that they're allowed to use for research purposes. So that's something that when I ask Danica about if there's any like research about these things, these topics we're thinking about, I can ask her about that as well. I used to work at a company that did use GitLab, and I would say that like very broadly speaking, we kind of used it the same way for issues specifically, like formatting of the issue description and whatever. We kind of use it sort of the same way that we do internally at GitLab. Like I think that the formatting of our issue templates is one way that we're typical, I think, to our users. Like there's nothing really special, I would say, about our issue templates.
Do you think that, or like internally GitLab, since it's like async and remote, there's a lot more comments? Like, would you say that's true?
And that might be true. I think it depends so much, but I do think that in a in an organization where there's a like, I think it's very typical in engineering teams for there to be a really big long meeting that's either once a week or once every 2 weeks, kind of whatever your cadence is, where like the PM and engineering manager go through every issue and like read it all out loud to the whole team and ask for questions and clarifications and edits and whatever while they're doing it, and they might edit the description there. I think if that's happening, there may be fewer comments because that conversation is happening synchronously, and then they're like editing the description to like put those details in or whatever, and then the engineer who works on it later was hopefully paying attention during that conversation. It could be hard because that meeting gets really long when teams do that. But like they may have fewer follow-up questions because they might have asked those questions during that call. So in an organization that works that way, maybe fewer comments. I think that I don't know if the plan team has this data on hand, but some anonymized data about like the average number of comments on issues, like trying to look at like mean, median, and mode across our user base could be interesting data for this as well. I do wonder, we might be at the longer end of that, but I think that your intuition that it may be dependent on how async the work is probably right about that.
We can look in Dovetail too. I'm just trying, my computer is like embarrassingly slow right now, but I'm gonna try to find some videos. Maybe we could find these before Danica comes back. Also, Chad, of customers sharing their screen
Hmm.
and sharing their issues so that you have some more examples.
Gina, actually, I was just trying to do that and it's not showing up. I think it's not your computer, maybe Telltale. It's so slow, but
Okay.
yeah, I like this direction.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll do that and get back to you and maybe post them in Slack or something.
That would be great. Yeah. This is like, I think what the direction we're going now is like very focused on like the comment thread. So
And I do also think that if you can base your designs on like, like here's like, an anonymized version of a real user's real issue, and like here's what it would look like with our thing. I think that that is like more grounded in reality. It also like kind of makes your design story a little bit more compelling because it's not just like here's some nonsense we made up for the content of the issue. It's like this is real issue content and like here's what it would look like with our thing. I think
Mm.
that is good. That helps.
Mm.
Good question. Okay, anything else before we wrap it up? Okay, well, good luck. You've got a lot to do, and then I hope you, I don't know, go hang out on a beach or take a hike or whatever next week. But you can find us in Slack. Share these things with us as you produce them, and we'll give you feedback. We can also give you some feedback, async next week while you're out on them.
Mm. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
See ya.